Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. This week I played Iconoclasts by Bifrost Entertainment on the Nintendo Switch. This is one of those odd instances where I have no idea how it got onto my list. I mean, it is a Metroidvania indie title with cute sprite art, which does tick a lot of boxes for me, but I still don't know how it got on my radar. Game Grumps did play for 2 episodes, but I kinda think I had it downloaded even before that. It feels like it's been sitting on my Switch, with all the other games I haven't gotten around to playing since before time began. Though that might be a little dramatic, so let's just say that I picked it up for some reason after being given the general impression that it'd be right up my alley, at some point I can't quite recall. In Iconoclast, you play as Robin, a young mechanic. Besides the basics of run and jump, she also has a gun she can fire and charge, with a few others popping up later, and a wrench she can use to smack enemies, activate switches, and swing from suspended bolts. It's not super complex, which I at least prefer to having way too many options being stuffed into the controller, tying both your brain and fingers in knots trying to keep everything straight. As for how it actually controls though, it kinda varies. For basic movement, it works pretty well. I was able to hop and skip past a lot of enemies when I was in a hurry, and it was fun leaping from walls and bolts, making jumps that I didn't think were possible. At the same time though, Robin sometimes refuses to climb ladders. Sometimes she swings her wrench rather than using it on a bolt you're right on top of, and sometimes she just won't hang on to zip lines. There's also a few other characters that you can play at some points in the game. Mina can run and jump just fine, but aiming her shotgun feels like you're wrestling with a joystick. Then there's another that you play really late in the game, which I don't want to get too specific on. Let's just say that they move slowly and poke things. They're not hard to control, just awkward. I'm really not sure if this was meant to be a challenge to the player with the limited actions available or some kind of weird joke, but if it was meant as more of a prank, I'd say it stopped being amusing pretty early on. All this leads me to having pretty mixed feelings on the controls. A lot of times it works well enough, but then these hiccups crop up and break your forward momentum. As for the game's world, everything is interconnected, and what parts you gain access to expands as either new abilities or plot points open them up. I said it was a Metroidvania, and even the map is laid out like the classics from the genre. That said, exploration doesn't seem as important as usual. Normally, when you get to a new area, you have several different ways you can check out, but typically all but the way forward is blocked off. So, if you're not going in the intended direction, you're wasting your time. This can get quite tiresome, especially in the one area where you had about a dozen rooms you could go to, but usually you'd only be able to do something in one of them at a time, leading to you running around the area, trying to remember where the thing you just got needed to be used, with the whole place being laid out in such an unremarkable way that keeping track of what connects to what how wasn't really intuitive. Even outside of this level though, there's a lot of backtracking, and I don't just mean in the typical sense of Metroidvanias, with you going back to a place after getting a new upgrade to either find something hidden or get further in. No, I mean just a lot of running back and forth. Going down a path to unlock a door where you just were, then going through that to unlock another door right by where you unlocked the last, which finally gives you a key to unlock an object at around the midpoint of the 2 spots you just kept on running between. It really feels like the game was purposefully wasting my time to inflate my playtime, which was around 10 hours if you're wondering. A lot of the puzzles for progressing required doing a lot of very specific steps in a specific order, which were typically harder to pull off without any of the aforementioned hiccups than they were to figure out. They could be very tedious and boring, as one small mistake would lead to needing to start the whole process over again, maybe even wait for something to deactivate so that you could take it from the top. Of course, there are a few side paths and out of the way bits that you can explore to get some rewards. You can find chests that contain materials you can use to craft tweaks, which will give you bonuses like taking an extra hit or extending how long you can hold your breath. You can equip 3 at once, and these can break as you take damage. As you destroy stuff though, they get repaired. In the beginning of the game, I tried to search out all of these I could, but I stopped trying so hard partway through. Part of this was just how little difference these tweaks seem to make. I mean, it's cool that I can make my wrench do more damage, but I use my guns primarily for offense. And while being electrified can be helpful, at other times it just means that you have to wait longer for it to wear off before you can restart a puzzle. and since most of the perks didn't seem worth the effort, I just stopped bothering to craft and just stuck with whatever loadout I had decided on earlier. The exception was the roll I could craft, if I could just get 2 of the only rare material in the game, which they gave me only 1 of. Ironically, I found the second after I beat the game and went back to get some commentary-free video of it. It really would have been a big help against some of the bosses that were either too big or too fast to dodge effectively otherwise. Most of these chests don't take you too far out of your way and are fairly obvious, so I would still try to grab them due to the compulsion that I developed after playing games for all these years. Still, with the exception of the 2 jizz blobs I needed to craft the roll ability, pretty much every one I opened felt like a waste of time, which is a horrible feeling to get in a Metroidvania especially, where they actively remind you of what percentage of the extras you found. These collectibles feel like they were thrown in more because they were expected to be rather than something worthwhile to be sought out, especially with how little they take you off the beaten path, making them seem like more effort to ignore than collect. I managed to get just over half of them without even trying, and even that felt like more than I should have bothered with. As for difficulty, I'd say a good deal of the challenge requires more perseverance than skill. There were so many times I just wanted to be done with a puzzle or traveling through the same area again and again. As long as I kept at it though, eventually things would work as intended. The bosses were where I got the vast majority of my restarts though. Most of them weren't too bad in the first half of the game, with the exception of the one that required about a half dozen steps to deal damage to. In the second half though, they were all over the place, from tough as nails to gimmies to one that was really damn tedious. Even the final boss was a mixed bag, with their prelude being a total pain in the ass, then the following 2 stages being somewhere between reasonable to actually kind of fun. There were 1 or 2 bosses in particular that, had I not been streaming the game, I might have just quit the whole damn thing. And like I mentioned before, some of these would have been much more manageable had I had the damn roll to contend with them with. The game's story is interesting, kinda. The society Robin lives in is ruled by a religious hierarchy that pretty much determines most aspects of its citizens' lives, from occupation to where they live to how resources are distributed, and any deviance from the established status quo is met with harsh punishment, namely execution. The whole thing's a pretty clear admonishment of giving either religion or government too much power. While Robin has not been assigned a job, she still does work as a mechanic and is soon branded a heretic and becomes a fugitive. She mostly travels around, trying not to get caught, helping people along the way, and getting dragged deeper and deeper into conspiracies in the process. She also makes friends with a woman named Mina from the Isi tribe, a group of people labeled as pirates so that they're easier to persecute. Their religion focuses more on procreating, which led to some interesting conversations and imagery. The lore on its own can be kinda dark and deep, but in the context of everything else, it didn't really hook me personally. The later in the game it got, the less patience I had for sitting through cutscenes or exposition dumps, as I just really wanted to be done. It also didn't help that by the end I really only cared about maybe 5 of the characters, one of them being Robin, who I grew fond of due to familiarity, 2 minor characters, and one I only started to like after some major character growth and only about 30 minutes before the game was done with them. If I had either been having more fun with the actual gameplay or been charmed with the cast more, I think I would have been much more invested in the plot, but for the most part, I just felt uncomfortable. Despite the bright and cartoonish sprite work, there were a lot of heavy themes and a lot of heavy consequences as a result. Typically, I wouldn't mind and even enjoy the contrast, but the game takes things a bit further, dragging Robin into some conversations that she really shouldn't be a part of. She is largely a silent protagonist, only having dialogue at specific points where you're given a few choices of what she says. That makes her already come across as a bit awkward socially, but it's really bad when other characters seem to just forget she's even there and have deeply personal conversations while she just kinda fidgets and looks like she wants to leave but can't quite seem to figure out how to extricate herself from the situation. I think not even 30 minutes in, I was repairing something at her in-laws' house, which placed her literally in the middle of a marital dispute as the couple's child just stared off at a corner to the side, and I thought, wow, I don't think I've ever done this in a game before. Even the side quests are kinda demoralizing. I did 2, and in each, I would set out with a goal, running back and forth from the quest giver and target a few times, only to have things disintegrate by the end and getting a reward more for my trouble than the actual realization of the objective. I get that it's probably meant to be more of a subversion of expectations than what you would normally get with these, but seriously, if this started to becoming the standard in other games, I don't think anyone would bother with them. The game's plot seems to do everything it can to make you uncomfortable, with the exception of sex crimes. While there might be a whole group of people whose reasons for being might be getting it on, it never seems to be non-consensual. While there might be some unwanted flirting, it doesn't cross that line. And while there are some children put into danger and kept under some pretty questionable circumstances, it's never implied that it crosses into that territory, so SA seems to be the only line in all of its forms that the game is not willing to cross, which I appreciate that they gave us at least that one bastion of comfort. While I'd say that the story is the best thing about the game, with maybe the exception of the sprite work, maybe because of everything else, or maybe even despite that, it left me wanting to more just quietly see myself out than engage with it. And that's Iconoclast. I really wanted to like it, especially with it being an indie game. From what I hear, the whole thing was made by one guy over several years, and while the result is certainly impressive, I just can't call it fun. It wasn't bad at first, then lapsed into tolerable, then to downright miserable when I sat down for my last play session. That said, I seem to be in the minority on this. Most reviews seem pretty positive. I think I even saw the term masterpiece thrown around once or twice. There are still a chunk of dissenting opinions though, and it's hard to even find much on the game, so it's kinda hard to even judge if it have a broad appeal. For me though, I'd say keep your distance, and that I really wish I had spent my time on something else. For right now, I'm going to post this video and then never think about this game again. Well, that was mildly depressing, though it does take us down to 109 for the backlog. I'm about finished with an RPG I've been working on, and I also plan on fiddling with a game that I have hundreds of hours in but haven't touched in about 2 years, so I should have some good stuff in store for next week. So thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you in the next episode.